This is my visual aid. And these are my note cards. And this is my mom who's going to be recording me today. Have you ever felt yourself being divided from someone, but there wasn't much you could do about it? Well, this is exactly how our world is today. Our population is split between people who have access to the internet and people who don't have access to the internet. And this is a very big issue. This is what we call the digital divide. The digital divide has been going on since the internet has existed. And I've been wondering why this issue is so big and how we can fix this. And today I'm going to be persuading you on how big this issue actually is and how you and the help of others can help solve this issue. But first, let's talk about the digital divide. The digital divide is a very big issue in the world today. And people can describe it in many different ways. And Chad Raphael, in his 2008 book titled Digital Divide, describes it as the space between people who have access to the internet and people who don't have access to the internet. And you might be thinking, well, do we really need the internet? Well, as a matter of fact, we do, because we need to know what's going on in the world today. Because if we didn't have the access to the internet that most of us have, then we wouldn't be able to know what's going on outside of our houses right now. And the people who don't have that access versus the people who do are what's creating this big space between them. Barney Worf's 2010 encyclopedia, titled Digital Divide, says that in 2009, 1.7 billion people, or 26% of the world's population, accessed the internet every day. And the people who didn't were from third world countries, which, if you think about it, 26%, that's not a very big percent. So the rest of those people being in third world countries who don't access the internet are creating this big gap. This is shown in this map right here. This map shows that in the developing countries, such as countries in sub-Saharan Africa, there's not much people accessing the internet every day. But then in the developed countries, such as the United States and countries in Europe, people are accessing the internet very frequently. And this space between these people is what the digital divide is, and it's such a big gap. This same book takes a deeper look at the United States itself. It says the United States is mainly split between the factors of age, race, gender, and income. And this is shown in this chart here. This chart shows the percent of people online for these different groups in 2006 and 1995, and the percent of growth. And you might be looking at the growth percents and thinking, well, those numbers aren't that different, so this gap can't be that big. But that would be wrong. A study done by the United States Secretary of Commerce in the year 2000 says that this gap is getting bigger and bigger. Even with the better technology and the more advancements in having access to the internet, this gap just continues to grow, and it's getting way out of control. So how can we even try and solve this issue? Well, there are three main ways we can help and solve this big issue. And one is with the help of you. You can inform people on digital literacy. What is digital literacy, you might ask? Well, digital literacy is the information that we use to get onto the internet and the information on how to access the internet. So people who don't normally access the internet need to know about digital literacy and how important it is for them to access the internet, because if they don't, then this gap is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And Mayor Patel, in his 2012 article on knightfoundation.org, says that this is the most important way for us to close this gap. Because if you can inform just one person on the importance of digital literacy and how important and vital it is to access the internet every day, then that can close this gap altogether. But what if these people can't access the internet because they can't afford it? Well, this is where internet service providers come in. The internet service providers are the companies that provide us with the internet. And if they can lower their costs, according to an article published on otelco.com on February 2017, it says that if they can lower their costs, we can bring this gap together, bring the division together, because the majority of the people who can't afford the internet might be able to now afford it if they can lower their costs. But when they lower their costs, won't that affect their financial stability and their stockholders? Well, yeah, but they can come up with plans, such as maybe basing their prices off their incomes of their customers. So if their customer has a low income, they charge lower prices. Or if they have a high income, they can charge higher prices, so that everyone wins in this situation. The internet service providers also need to survey their areas before they do their service, put their service in those areas. So this means looking at all these different areas and seeing what those areas need. So economically, they can see if they need to lower the prices because maybe it's a poor area, or socially, they can look at all the minorities and all the groups that are in these areas and ask them, hey, what are your needs? How can we help provide you with internet? And Martin Ryder, in his 2005 encyclopedia titled Digital Divide, says that if the internet service providers can take in all these factors before they put in their businesses here, then they can lessen the digital divide and close this gap. So with your help by informing people on digital literacy and how important it is, and with the help of the internet service providers basing their prices off the incomes and evaluating their areas before they put their service there, we can help close this gap. In conclusion, the digital divide is a very big issue in the world today. The digital divide is described as the space between people who have access to the internet and people who don't have access to the internet. And there are three main ways we can solve and close this big gap. Two being with the internet service providers. The internet service providers can base their prices off the income of the family so that more people can afford it and have that access. And they can also evaluate their areas before they put their service there so they can have all the needs of all these groups and take them in so that they can suit their needs and have internet. So are you going to start educating people on the importance of digital literacy and help to close this gap? Or are you just going to watch this gap get bigger and bigger? Thank you.